Most men will never live the life they want for one simple reason. They think exactly like the people they are trying to outperform. They borrow the fears of everyone else. They adopt the small, average way of seeing the world. And then they wonder why their life looks like everyone else's. There's only one solution to this. You must stop thinking like everyone else. You must change your mindset. And eventually, your life will begin to change. Because it all begins in the mind. Most people do not lose in action first. They lose in thought. They think like everyone else. They fear what everyone else fears. They call their average expectations wisdom. And then they wonder why their life looks like everyone else's. But most people don't realize that if you only do what everyone else is doing, you'll only ever have what everyone else has. That is true in the gym. It is true in work. It is true in life. Average thinking creates average lives. And the tragedy is that most people never even notice they are trapped in it. They think they are making independent choices. They think they are being sensible. But much of what they call realism is just fear in respectable clothing. It is fear trained by culture, fear trained by failure. They lower their standards before effort is even required. That is how average thinking works. You don't usually notice it. It whispers, "Do not aim too high. Do not look foolish." And if a man obeys that voice long enough, he becomes trapped in an average life he desperately wants to escape. But the mind of a high performer is different, not because he was born with some mystical advantage. He is different because he learned to think differently. That is the separation. A high performer becomes uncommon in thought before he ever becomes uncommon in result. The high performer does not wait for the world to confirm what he sees before he starts moving toward it. Because he understands something most people never do. Results are late. Identity comes first. The outer life follows the inner one. That is why a man who wants a different life cannot keep the same mind. He cannot think like the crowd and then expect to rise above it. It does not work. The life changes after the way of thinking changes. That is why high performers seem strange in the beginning. They often believe before there is evidence. And to most ordinary people, that sounds foolish. But to the man who rises above, that is simply the price of creating something different. Because if you only move when the evidence is obvious, then you are already late. A high performer does not live like that. He thinks strategically. He asks what matters. He asks what kind of man he must become to hold the life he says he wants. He is not derailed by comparison. He is not constantly asking why someone else has more. He is asking what pattern, what discipline, what thinking produced that result. That is a completely different kind of mind. When average people see someone ahead of them, they often feel threatened. The man who refuses average becomes observant. He studies. He learns. He adapts. He does not turn another man's success into proof of his own limitation. He turns it into evidence that something greater is possible. That is how high performers think. And that matters more than most people understand. Because your thoughts are not harmless. Your thoughts become your actions, and your actions become your outcome. The things you repeat internally are eventually reflected externally. That is why mental discipline matters, and every high performer has it. He visualizes the life he wants. He sees himself differently before the world sees him differently. And that level of thinking creates a new identity, the identity of a high performer. You cannot build a new life with an old self-concept. A man rises or falls to the level of his identity. So if he still sees himself as someone who starts and quits, he will find a way to quit. That is why full commitment matters. You cannot become a high performer if you do not commit to it. A high performer is locked in and focused on their goal. They return to the mission again and again. They reject the cheap mental habits that keep other people trapped in cycles of distraction, fear, and self-negotiation. And yes, that can look obsessive or weird to average people. But average people often call anything disciplined obsession or weird, because it exposes their own inadequacies. They do not understand what it takes to become uncommon. They think in moods. They think in excuses disguised as balance. But balance never built the life they dream about. The man who wins thinks in standards. He understands that high-level thinking produces a high-level life. So he works. He trains the body. He sharpens the mind. He stays close to what strengthens him and far from what distracts him. That is the difference. Average men drift. High performers focus. Average men hope things improve. The man who rises seeks improvement. Average men wait to feel ready. The man who rises becomes ready by moving. This is not really about motivation. It is about refusing to think like everyone else. Refusing the average inner language that keeps most people chained to ordinary outcomes. Once a man changes the way he thinks, something deeper changes with it. He stops asking the world for permission. He stops letting fear decide what is possible. And from there, everything else begins to follow. The work gets sharper. The discipline gets cleaner. The results, eventually, begin to reflect the mind that created them. That is the real difference. The mind, the standard. So the next time you see a successful person, instead of assuming it isn't possible for you, ask instead, what level of thinking do I need to have to achieve that? Stop thinking like everyone else. Stop letting average minds teach you what is realistic. Think like the man you are trying to become. Think like a high performer. Think like the man who rises. Become the man who understands that uncommon lives are built first in uncommon minds. The world will keep trying to pull you down, and if you let it, you will stay stuck. You have to refuse to fall into mediocrity, and when you do, your mind will change, and not too long after, your life will follow.